All right, I still haven't got my voice back. I apologize, I'm a little bit croaky. In today's video, we are going to be taking a look at this guy here. This is the new Walksnail Ascent VRX Pro. We're also going to be taking a look at the new Walksnail Ascent Lite Plus air unit. And before I do that, I just want to explain one thing I really hate on YouTube is shills. I've always hated shills. There's nothing worse than reviewers that they get sent stuff for free and then they just praise it. They say it's amazing, even when it's completely rubbish. I absolutely hate those type of reviewers. And you know, part of the reason why I became a YouTuber is because I became frustrated by that. And I realized that the internet needs more people that actually just tell the truth and review things properly. So that's something that I've always tried to do. And you know, hopefully if you've been watching my channel for a while now, you'll know that I tell the truth in my videos. And if something's rubbish, I do say so. That said though, we are looking at this new Ascent system here today, and I'm going to skip straight to the point. This is really good. It actually works really well, and I'm really, really impressed with it. And this isn't me shilling. I'm telling you the truth, and I will prove it in a moment. So this is obviously the new Ascent system. Last year, the original Ascent system came out, and I never got to play with that myself, but from what I've seen from the various reviews, it didn't work very well. I think it had a lot of issues. So this is basically a version 2 of the Ascent system, and I'm sure there's been lots of changes happened on the inside, and I'm sure like Ian at Madstech will do a teardown and he'll tell you all of that. But the headline changes are that this new system is now capable of 1080p at 120 frames per second. The air unit is now capable of 500 milliwatts of transmission, whereas the previous was only 100 milliwatts. The air unit now also has a microphone on, and you can actually record audio from your flight, which some of you may or may not like. And then the other obvious change is these antennas. We've now got these very tall antennas here. They're called Redbird 2 antennas, and I'd love to know what's going on inside these, but clearly some kind of sort of black magic. And yeah, as I said, the original system apparently didn't work very well, but this works amazing. I've reviewed various HD systems over the years. Some have worked okay, some of them have worked terribly, and I've always said that that's the case when they don't work. But this just works. Like, you just take it out of the box, install it in your aircraft, power it all up, and it just works. I was really impressed with how well this just works. Obviously, you want me to prove it, so I'm going to put some footage on the screen for you now. I've done various different tests with this system, and the footage you're going to see on screen at the moment, this is from my first test. So for this, I had the air unit installed in my Hewing T2. This is my big VTOL fixed wing aircraft. And the module that I have on that test, I actually installed it on the back of an FPV monitor, and then I flew from the monitor. And yeah, that first test, the system set at 1080p at 60 frames per second with the maximum power output. And the reason why I was using only 60 frames per second is because that's all that screen could do. It couldn't do 120, could only do 60. But yeah, now look at the footage here. It's generally really, really nice footage. You know, bear in mind that the camera on the Ascent Lite Plus is absolutely tiny. Really, really nice footage. Nice, bright, colourful footage. Really good wide dynamic range. Nice wide angle. Just lovely footage coming out of the camera. But crucially, look at, like, you know, at this point in the video, I'm up to sort of about 1 kilometre, which is kind of the limit of what I can fly whilst maintaining line of sight on my Hewing T2. But the image is just basically perfect. Yeah, the bit rate's kind of bumping up and down a little bit, but it never goes so low that, you know, the image gets distorted. At no point do you see like any breakup or any jitter or anything. It just worked really well, and I had a really nice solid, you know, connection the entire way through the flight. Now, funnily enough, actually, I did also do another flight where I accidentally had the power output set to only 25 milliwatts. I didn't mean to do that, but I ended up doing a flight with that. And even then, I was still able to fly out to 1 kilometre, even at 25 milliwatts, although admittedly at that point, you know, I was starting to see, you know, some of that jittering, and I was getting the alerts on the screen and stuff to say I had low bit rate. But yeah, when I was flying at 500 milliwatts, it worked absolutely fantastically. Now, after doing that test, I then wanted to see, you know, how well does the system sort of perform, you know, 120 frames per second. And annoyingly, I couldn't quite test that just because I don't have any devices here that can do 120 frames per second. other than my TV, which I can't really take with me to the flying field. But what I do have is my Walksnail Avatar Goggles X. These could do 100 frames per second. It's obviously not quite 120, but they can do 100 frames per second. So for the next batch of testing, what I then did was I installed the module on the goggles. It does look a little bit ridiculous because you do have to have cables everywhere, like cable for the HDMI and another one for the power and stuff. But no, they do install on the goggles with the help of a little 3D printed mount, and then it's actually quite comfortable wearing it on your head. And then yeah, the footage you're seeing here, this is then from a flight that I did on another day, again with the Hewing T2. But this time 1080p at 100 frames per second. And again, it just worked. You know, I was able to, again, fly it to sort of about 1 kilometer. I didn't see any issues. I didn't see sort of any like lost frames, any pixelation. The system didn't go into like focus mode. It didn't jitter. I didn't get any alerts or anything. It just worked really, really well. And I was even able to fly behind myself, again, out to about 1 kilometer. Wasn't even aiming the module in the right direction. Directly behind myself and my head, I was still able to go out to 1 kilometer and have basically an absolutely perfect sort of transmission the entire way through. Now I know that some people get a little bit fickle about things like the bit rate, and you're going to be looking at my footage being like, oh, well, your bit rate went a little bit low. Yeah, sometimes it did go down a little bit low, but at no point did it go low enough that it actually caused any sort of visual disturbance to my flight. I think if you go below sort of like 2 megabits per second or 1 megabit per second, you'll then see the image maybe start to pixelate or jitter or anything. Never even got close to that. And at the end of the day, you know, when I'm flying, I don't really care what the bit rate is as long as I can see what I'm doing and where I'm going. And you know, with the system, I never had a problem with it. It just worked the entire time. Now, I know that obviously when you're flying a fixed wing sort of a bit higher up in the air, there's no obstacles and stuff. You know, the system's going to work a little bit better. It's not being strained so much. But I know that some people are going to be interested to know, well, what would the system be like on, you know, like a quadcopter, maybe one doing proximity. So I did also test that. On another day, I then installed the air unit in my HG LRC My 5-inch race quad. And then went down to one of my local parks. I've featured this on my videos before. It's got like a load of trees in there. And then I did a flight where I just kind of zigzagged in and around the trees. And crucially, at no point in this flight was the quad in front of me. It was behind me for the entirety of this flight. And as I was flying, I was progressively putting more and more trees between, you know, the drone and myself, basically incrementally increasing the amount of obstacles between. And again, the signal was almost perfect the entire way through. There's only one point in the flight where it did proper jitter, and that was at the point where I was at the furthest end of the park, and I think I had sort of like 6 or 7 sort of good-sized trees at that point between the drone and myself. And even then, it was only very, very briefly, you know, for like a second that the bit rate dropped and the picture kind of froze a little bit. That's obviously when I'm pushing the system to the max then. But all other points, as I was flying around this park, zigzagging around the trees, again, I just had a really good quality, you know, transmission, image, just everything just worked. I was just really, really impressed with this. And this is why I'm quite hyped about this. You know, I don't think I've ever had like a HD system where I've just taken it out of the box, powered it up, and it's just worked. This is why I'm sort of really excited about it. And you know, this is why I put a disclaimer at the beginning about shillings. I don't want you guys thinking that I'm just praising this because it was sent to me for free. Hopefully I'm proving to you in this footage that it does just work. Now, obviously there's a couple of other things I want to talk to you about this. So let's talk about the latency first. So this system, Caddx is saying that it should be capable of 35 milliseconds of latency. And the system is absolutely capable of doing that. Now, you might be wondering why there's been a sudden scene change and why my top's changed. And the reason for that is because this is Future Gears here. I'm currently sat here editing the video that you've just been watching, and I realized that actually I made a mistake. So in the original narration that I recorded, I was about to tell you that at no point in any of my testing did I ever see 35 milliseconds of latency. And actually I saw a much slower latency of around sort of 50 to 60 milliseconds. But it turns out that actually I was wrong. I've just been sort of rewatching my footage, and what I've realized is that in most of my tests, I was averaging 50 to 60 milliseconds of latency. But there was one flight where actually I was averaging 30 to 40 milliseconds latency, exactly as Caddx advertises. And that was the flight where I flew my Hewing T2 with the frame rate boosted from 60 frames per second up to 100 frames per second. Now that might seem a little bit counterintuitive, because you might be thinking, well, if you've boosted the frame rate, surely you've boosted the amount of data that's being sent, and surely that'll make the system run slower. But for reasons that are complicated to explain, that's actually not what happens, and it does do the opposite. So by boosting the frame rate, it actually does lower the latency. And I actually saw that on a couple of occasions, I actually got less than 35 milliseconds. I got like sort of like 32 or 33 milliseconds. So yeah, basic reason why I'm recording this is I wanted to correct what I originally said. The system is absolutely capable of doing 35 milliseconds of latency. However, you're only going to get that if you boost the frame rate up to at least 100 frames per second, and sort of potentially 120. But if you're going to fly with your sort of frame rate at only 60 frames per second, then expect a latency of sort of 50 to 60 milliseconds. But even then, I want to just sort of clarify that like that's such a tiny difference. I mean, like you got to be some kind of a superhuman to detect that latency change. And you know, when I was flying with a latency of 50 to 60 milliseconds, I couldn't tell you. I couldn't notice that. It's imperceivable to my eye. And I think that unless you're trying to do like really, really high speed, high performance acrobatics with a race quad or something, you're never going to notice it. So yeah, this system is absolutely capable of doing 35 milliseconds of latency. And I just wanted to correct what I originally said. Anyway, back to the original narration. Next thing I want to talk about is the OSD. So you will notice in the footage that I showed you here that all of the footage has got the OSD on it. So there's no way to record flight footage directly onto the air unit with this system, at least not with this current one. So the only way to record DVR is on the module. It's got an SD card slot. But you'll find that after your flight, if you take the SD card out and you look at your footage, it's got the OSD on. It's not like the Avatar system where you'd get two files. You get your video file and then your OSD file, and then you can choose to add it. At the moment, it's just added for you. However, I have been told by my agent at Caddx that in a future firmware update that will change, and it will then be like the Avatar system. And then you can have separate file for OSD and flight footage if you want. So yeah, and then the next thing to talk about is the cost. So this system, I've been told, is going to cost $190 at launch, which works out at about £140, which to me is an amazing price. You know, you're getting a HD system here that can do 1080p, can certainly do 100 frames per second, and you know, allegedly do 120 frames per second, and it's like 500 milliwatts of power output as well. To get that for $190 or £140, I think that's amazing. You know, if you look at the other HD systems, like the Avatar system, you'll spend £140 just buying an air unit. And for DJI, it's even more expensive as well. So to get like an entire HD system here for that price, I think is really good, especially because it actually works as well. You know, you're actually getting good performance for your money. Now, it's a little bit annoying that obviously you have to do this with a module. You have to bolt it onto your goggles or onto like a screen or something. But I have been told that next month, September, there is a new pair of goggles coming out for the Ascent system, which means obviously you won't need a module because you'll just have a separate pair of goggles. And that also brings me on to one of the highlights of this system as well is the fact that it can do audio. We've never had a HD system before that can do audio. And at the moment, the way it works is that obviously there's a little microphone on the air unit and it's sending the audio back to the receiver unit here. You can't hear it live, but obviously when you then play back your DVR, you can hear it, and I'll play a little bit of that for you now. As you can see, you can kind of hear like the sort of the sound of the motors and stuff. Some people might like that, others might not. Personally, I do quite like it. I've actually done videos in the past where I've actually put live audio on my flights, so I think it actually makes it quite immersive. But yeah, at the moment, you can only hear the audio after the fact, but when these new goggles come out, apparently, you'll then be able to hear the audio live. I don't know any details. I don't know whether they've got like a built-in speaker or it's just going to have like a headphone point. I don't know. But with the new goggles, you'll then be able to hear the audio live if you want to. And that could be useful. Like I say, if you're flying long range, the ability to hear if your motor suddenly dies on you, that's a very, very useful thing. So yeah, that is basically my review of this new Walksnail Ascent system, basically their V2 Ascent system. I've pretty much got nothing but good things to say about it. And just at the beginning of the video, I know how annoying it is when YouTubers shill, and I really generally promise you I'm not shilling. Hopefully I can kind of proven it to you with the footage I showed you here. It just works straight away, and it's no hassle. It just works straight away. Very, very nice to have something that just works with no problems. Now, I do just want to clarify that this isn't a long-range HD system. If you want to do long range, you're going to want to use the Walksnail Avatar system, because that's rated for like 30 or 40 kilometers. This system's only really rated for, I think they say 8 kilometers, and even then I think you've got to upgrade the antennas and stuff. But you know, if you're like me, a bit of a park flyer, if you're just sort of like slipping a quad around a park, or you know, flying a fixed wing down by the coast or something, it's fine for something like that. But yeah, not for sort of long range stuff. So yeah, that's basically everything I've got for you today. I'm going to leave you now because I really need to rest my voice. It's actually been quite hard to be able to talk to make this video. But as always, if you have enjoyed watching this video, please do give it a like down below, because it does generally help keep the almighty YouTube gods happy. And yeah, I guess I'll catch you in the next one. Cheers guys, bye.